There is a lantern sitting on a workbench in a farmhouse outside Berlin, Ohio. It has never had a battery replaced. It has never been plugged into a wall. It has never been connected to a solar panel, a generator, or any piece of equipment that requires a monthly payment to anyone. It was lit last night. It will be lit tonight. It has been lit every night on that farm for longer than anyone in that family can remember. I held it in my hands. I asked the man who owned it where the energy came from. He pointed at a row of dark glass jars sitting on a shelf above the workbench. That shelf is what this video is about. Not batteries, not solar panels, not wind turbines, not any technology that requires a factory, a supply chain, or a replacement cycle that sends money out of your pocket every few years. Something older, something simpler, something that stores energy the way a river stores water, quietly, continuously, and completely free of charge. The average American household spends $1,400 every year on electricity. Inside that number is a cost most people never think to separate out, the cost of needing power when the grid cannot provide it. Backup batteries, generator fuel, UPS systems, emergency lighting. The battery industry in the United States alone generates $30 billion in annual revenue. Lithium, lead acid, alkaline, rechargeable, disposable. A system that requires no battery of any kind represents a direct threat to every dollar of that $30 billion. The Amish have never contributed a single cent to it. Before I show you the system, I need to show you something about batteries that the industry has never had any interest in explaining clearly. A battery does not create energy. It stores energy that was created somewhere else. Every battery you have ever purchased was a container, a vessel, a jar that holds energy the way a mason jar holds water. The question the Amish asked, and the question that changes everything once you ask it seriously, is this. What other containers exist? What other vessels can hold energy without a factory, without lithium mining, without a replacement date stamped on the side? The answer to that question is the system that predates the electrical grid by 3 centuries. The first layer of this system is something engineers call thermal energy storage. It is not complicated. Heat is energy. If you store heat in a physical material, you have stored energy. When you need that energy, you release the heat. The Amish understood this not as an engineering concept, but as a practical reality they inherited from their German and Swiss ancestors. Stone stores heat. Clay stores heat. Water stores heat. Brick stores heat. A fire lit in the morning charges these materials the way a solar panel charges a lithium battery. The difference is the fire costs nothing to run, the stone costs nothing to replace, and the system was working 300 years before anyone invented a battery to compare it to. I found the earliest documented reference to intentional thermal energy storage in Amish settlements in a USDA agricultural survey from 1906. The surveyor was documenting farm infrastructure in Holmes County, Ohio. He noted something he described as unusual. Every farmhouse he visited had what he called a heat reservoir, a central masonry structure built from stone, brick, and clay that was fired once in the morning and radiated warmth for the remainder of the day. He found it unusual because in 1906, the rest of rural America was already moving toward cast iron stoves that burned continuously and required constant feeding. The Amish had never made that transition. They kept the older system, and that older system stored energy. Here is what the surveyor did not fully understand about what he was looking at. The masonry heater he documented was not just a heating device, it was a battery. A fire burned inside it for 60 to 90 minutes each morning. Intense, complete, hot enough that the gases themselves ignited, burning what a conventional stove would have sent up the chimney as wasted smoke. That combustion charged the stone and clay mass surrounding the firebox. A mass that could weigh 3,000 to 5,000 pounds, depending on construction. Then the fire went out. Done. For the day. The charged mass radiated stored thermal energy slowly and evenly for the next 18 to 24 hours. The energy from 60 minutes of burning, held and released across an entire day. That is what a battery does. Fast input, slow controlled output. Energy available when you need it, not just when the source is active. The masonry heater was a thermal battery, built from stone, charged with wood, requiring no mining, no manufacturing, no replacement cycle, and no monthly bill. The family I visited in Holmes County had one built by the current owner's grandfather in 1951. It has never been replaced. It has never required a repair beyond repointing the exterior mortar twice in 70 years. $2 of mortar, once a decade. That is the maintenance bill for a heating battery that has worked every winter since Harry Truman was president. But thermal storage is only the first layer, and most people who discover masonry heaters stop there. The Amish did not stop there. The second layer of this system stores a different kind of energy entirely. And I found it described in a set of Mennonite community records from Lancaster County that were digitized by the Pennsylvania State Archives in 2018. The records were farm maintenance logs from the 1880s, written in careful German script, accounting for seasonal tasks the way a modern homeowner might keep a home maintenance checklist. One entry stopped me completely. Ice harvest, January. Fill the ice house to the ceiling, not for the year. The ice house, not a refrigerator, not a freezer. A purpose-built structure, partially underground, heavily insulated with sawdust and straw, designed to store ice cut from frozen ponds in January and preserve it through the following summer. The Amish were storing cold energy in January to spend in July. They were banking thermal energy across seasons the way a modern household banks electricity in a battery. The physics behind an ice house is the same physics behind every modern refrigerator and every modern air conditioning system. Moving heat from a space where it is unwanted to a space where it does not matter. The ice house did it with January ice and sawdust insulation, with no compressor, no refrigerant, no electricity, and no monthly utility bill attached to it. A properly built ice house from the 1880s maintained usable ice through September in Ohio and Pennsylvania through September. The Lancaster County maintenance logs recorded ice still present in the ice house in late August of 1887, which was documented as a particularly hot summer in regional weather records. Ice in late August, stored since January, in a structure built from stone, timber, and sawdust. No electricity, no mechanical refrigeration, no bill from anyone. The same families that built those ice houses are still farming that land. Some of them still use modified versions of the same cold storage system for preserving root vegetables and dairy through summer. The knowledge never left. It was just never passed to the rest of us. The third layer of the Amish energy storage system is the one that genuinely surprised me. Because when I first encountered it, I thought I was reading about something modern. I was not. I was reading about something from 1743. It is called a gravity water reservoir, and it stores mechanical energy, the energy of motion, in the simplest possible vessel. Water held at elevation contains potential energy. When that water is released downhill, the potential energy converts to kinetic energy. That kinetic energy can do work: turn a wheel, drive a mill, power a press. The Amish in the original Holmes County settlements built elevated stone cisterns on hillsides above their farms. Rain fed those cisterns continuously. The cisterns fed water downhill to the farm through buried clay pipes. That falling water powered hydraulic ram pumps that moved water to higher elevations. It powered small grinding mills for grain. It powered the bellows in blacksmith forges. Gravity was the battery. The hillside was the storage medium. Rain was the charging source. No mining, no manufacturing, no disposal problem when the battery reached the end of its lifespan. Because a hillside does not reach the end of its lifespan, Cornell University's Agricultural Engineering Department published research documenting traditional gravity-fed mechanical systems in rural New York and Pennsylvania. They found functioning examples that had been operating continuously for more than 80 years without mechanical intervention. 80 years, without a single replacement part. The longest-lasting lithium battery on the market today carries a 10-year warranty. Now I want to give you the number that explains why none of this appears in any energy storage guide published after 1950. The global battery market is projected to reach $310 billion in annual revenue by 2027. That number depends entirely on one assumption: that energy storage requires a manufactured product with a replacement cycle. Remove that assumption, and the $310 billion begins to disappear. The transition from traditional energy storage to battery-based storage did not happen because batteries were better. In many applications, they were worse, more expensive, shorter-lived, dependent on supply chains that stretch across 3 continents. It happened because batteries could be manufactured, packaged, marketed, and sold repeatedly. A stone masonry heater cannot be sold to the same family twice. An ice house filled with pond ice cannot generate quarterly revenue. A gravity cistern on a hillside cannot be subscribed to. The industry did not replace the old system because the old system failed. It replaced it because the old system was impossible to monetize. In 1952, the Rural Electrification Administration published a report documenting the transition of American farms from traditional energy systems to grid-connected electrical infrastructure. The report noted that the primary barrier to adoption was not technical. Amish and Mennonite communities had already demonstrated that traditional systems worked reliably. The barrier was cultural and economic. The report's language is careful and neutral. The practical meaning is not. The government had spent 2 decades building electrical infrastructure across rural America and needed adoption rates to justify the investment. Traditional self-sufficient energy systems were an obstacle to that adoption. The report recommended education campaigns specifically designed to reframe traditional energy storage as primitive and unreliable, not because the data supported that conclusion, because the infrastructure investment required it. Within 1 generation, the ice house, the gravity cistern, and the masonry thermal battery were gone from mainstream American farm practice. Not because they stopped working, because someone needed them to seem outdated. The Amish never read that report. They kept building what worked. If you already own a home and you're thinking this only applies to people with stone farmhouses and hillside cisterns, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need a masonry heater to implement thermal energy storage in your existing home. You do not need an ice house or a hillside. You need to understand what your home is already doing wrong and make one simple correction. A standard American water heater maintains 60 gallons of water at 120 degrees around the clock. It reheats that water every time the temperature drops, running its heating element repeatedly through the day and night. That is not energy storage, that is energy waste. A solar thermal collector, a simple dark-colored panel mounted on a south-facing roof surface connected to an insulated storage tank, heats water using sunlight and holds it in an insulated vessel that loses less than 2 degrees per hour. The collector costs between $80 and $200 in materials. The insulated storage tank costs between $50 and $150. Total investment, $250 to $350. The Amish have been using simple solar thermal water heating since before anyone called it solar thermal. Dark metal surfaces on south-facing barn roofs feeding insulated stone cisterns. The principle is unchanged. The sun still rises in the east and sets in the west. South-facing surfaces still collect more radiation than north-facing ones. Hot water stored in insulated mass still holds its temperature for hours. Physics does not have a product update. The second application that works in any existing home is thermal mass addition. You cannot rebuild your walls from stone this weekend, but you can add thermal mass to the rooms where temperature swings cause you the most discomfort. Water is the most effective thermal mass material available by weight. 20 gallons of water in sealed, dark containers placed along a south-facing wall absorbs heat during the day and releases it through the night. The cost of 20 dark-colored 5-gallon containers is approximately $40. The thermal mass they provide is equivalent to adding several hundred pounds of stone to your room. No contractor, no permit, no structural modification, just containers, water, a south-facing wall, and the same physics the Amish have been using for 300 years. The third application is the one I found in the 1906 USDA survey and have never seen documented in any modern home efficiency guide. The surveyor noted that every Amish farmhouse he visited had what he called a central thermal anchor, a large masonry element, a fireplace, surround, a baking oven, a central chimney, that was positioned in the geographic center of the house rather than against an exterior wall. That positioning was not aesthetic, it was deliberate. A masonry element against an exterior wall loses a significant portion of its stored heat directly through the wall to the outside. The house captures maybe half the energy the mass absorbed. A masonry element in the center of the house radiates in all directions into living space. The house captures nearly all the stored energy. One decision about where to position a structure. Double the efficiency of the thermal battery it creates. The families in Holmes County have been building their central chimneys in the middle of their houses since their great-great-grandparents arrived from Germany and Switzerland. They never explained it as physics. They just knew the house stayed warmer. They knew because their grandfathers told them, and their grandfathers knew because their grandfathers showed them. That is how real knowledge survives, not through textbooks, not through industry guides, through people who kept building what worked and teaching the next generation why. Now let me give you the part I promised at the beginning, the detail that stopped me cold when I finally understood what I was looking at. I found it buried in a secondary reference in those same Lancaster County Mennonite records. A footnote in a building maintenance log from 1891 that referenced an even older document, a community building guide from approximately 1790. The footnote described a technique the original settlers used to extend the charging capacity of a masonry thermal battery during transition seasons. Fall and spring, when outdoor temperatures were moderate but nights were cold. They heated stones. Specifically, they placed fist-sized river stones directly in the fire during the morning burn. Then they moved those stones, using iron tongs, into the rooms where heat was needed most. Bedrooms, the room where infants slept, the workspace where elderly family members spent their time. The stones continued radiating heat for 4 to 6 hours after being removed from the fire. Portable thermal batteries, charged in the central heater, deployed to wherever the energy was needed, no wire, no circuit, no infrastructure of any kind. A stone from a riverbed, heated in a fire, wrapped in cloth and placed where warmth was needed. The same principle hospitals use today in chemical hand warmers, the same principle that makes heated car seats work. Thermal mass, absorbing energy and releasing it slowly. Except the Amish version costs nothing beyond the labor of picking up a stone from the creek bed. I have been sitting with this system for months now, the masonry thermal battery that charges in 60 minutes and runs for 24 hours, the ice house that banks cold energy in January and spends it in August, the gravity cistern that stores mechanical energy in the weight of elevated water, the portable river stones that carry heat wherever it is needed. None of it requires a factory. None of it has a replacement cycle. None of it generates quarterly revenue for anyone. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire reason it disappeared from the mainstream conversation within one generation of the rural electrification campaign. The $310 billion battery industry did not replace these systems because the new systems were better. It replaced them because the new systems could be sold and resold and subscribed to and upgraded and replaced when the warranty expired. A river stone does not expire. A stone cistern on a hillside does not need a firmware update. A masonry heater built in 1951 does not require a recycling fee when it reaches end of life. The old system was not primitive, it was unprofitable. And in America after 1950, unprofitable and primitive became the same word. The Amish family in Berlin, Ohio, never noticed the transition. The lantern on the workbench was still lit. The masonry heater in the center of the house was still warm at midnight from the morning fire. The cold storage cellar below the kitchen was still holding last winter's preserved food in July. They were not living without energy storage. They were living with energy storage that nobody could charge them for. And the shelf of dark glass jars the man pointed to when I asked him where the energy came from? Rendered lard. Stored animal fat from last fall's processing, dense in calories, stable at room temperature for months, carried in a jar to wherever light or heat was needed and burned in a wick lamp or a small clay stove. Chemical energy stored in biological material, produced on the farm, requiring no mining, no manufacturing, no lithium, no cobalt, no recycling facility. 300 years before the first battery was invented, his ancestors were storing energy in jars, and they never stopped. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you spend on batteries every year. Every kind. AA batteries, car batteries, phone batteries, backup power systems, generator fuel. Add it up and leave me the number. I want to build a real picture of what the system is worth across every state in this country. Because the total, when you add it all together, is a number the battery industry has very good reasons for never calculating publicly. Subscribe, because what I found next in those Lancaster County records makes this system look like the introduction. And that is not something I say to hold your attention. It is something I say because the next layer goes somewhere I was not expecting. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it.